This sermon is about Halloween and the question that we start off with is Halloween for Christians? I think the short answer to that is no, of course not. But more than that, I want to be able to explain why it's not. So throughout this presentation, we'll be getting into the why and the why nots and why some people do what they do and some of the beginnings of Halloween and how it got started, what is the basis for it, what are the certain things that people do that, and what is the basis for it as well. One of the first questions I ask is why October the 31st? You would think that the 31st is just like any ordinary day, but in the reality, there is a reason for that. There was a group of witches and warlocks from England, but they were known as the Druids. The Druids were a type of witches or warlock that took their craft very seriously, so there was not really anything that they did for fun at all. They sacrificed people to cast spells and even fought against Caesar using spells and incantations. I don't know how successful they were against him. Maybe to some degree, but I'm not really sure exactly how that turned out. But they did use magic to raise storms, create magical obstacles, and even kill people with their dark magic. I think the reality is that a lot of young people today are fascinated with witchcraft and all the different implications of it, because they see power, they see things that they can control. That's why there's so much fascination with superheroes today. It's more like we are gods. Therefore, we don't need our Heavenly Father. And it's a sad situation we're getting into today. And they made it more enticing, but back then, I don't think it was enticing. It was probably pretty scary stuff. Now, October the 31st was celebrated by the Druids with many human sacrifices and a festival honoring their sun god, Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. Now, this is interesting because there is a celebration the day before on October the 30th, and that is the Day of the Dead. And people don't really know how that got started. But what they were trying to do is they were trying to Christianize Halloween by creating the Day of the Dead and bringing up their skulls and the different dress that they use, that was very similar to Halloween. Now, this is very much akin to what has happened for the Sabbath day of rest. Started off is the only day anybody rested from and worshipped way back in the beginning. But people tried to change that and they made it the next day, just like they did the Day of the Dead, the day before this Halloween thing celebration. I guess they were trying to Christianize it as well, because I guess they don't really believe that Sabbath keepers are Christians, but of course they are. And I'm very proud to have been a Sabbath keeper most of my life, other than my childhood and early youth. But the point here is that October the 31st was when the Druids in England began worshiping their Lord of the Dead, Samhain. And a lot of the things that are done in Halloween today were done back then as well. And you've probably seen pictures of Stonehenge, all these stones that are standing up and very heavy stones. A lot of people wonder how in the world they actually managed to get all these stones lined up that way. Now, the Druids, according to them, if you ask them, and they do exist today because they're probably going to be very busy on October 31st as well. The inner circle is where they actually worship this, their Lord of the Dead, and people on the outer circle are, hangers on, people that are enticed by it or entertained, and they aspire to someday be in the inner circle where all of the more important of the Druids participate there. I doubt if they do any more human sacrifices anymore, but I think I've heard that they do animal sacrifices at least. The point here is that they're still honoring their God, the Lord of the Dead. Excuse me, and I believe that's nothing more than the devil himself. Today, direct descendants of the Druids gather and perform their rituals at Stonehenge. They gather on the same day, October the 31st, just when all the children are running around trick-or-treating, and they get together to celebrate their version of Halloween, which is pretty scary stuff. The term Halloween means All Hallows Even. The word hallow means to make holy or to revere as holy. How in the world can you make something holy that is unholy? I have no idea. But yet that's what they're doing. So Halloween itself is making a pagan day holy, at least in their ritualism and their ideas and so forth. But we need to understand that pagan observances like Halloween, and there's other pagan holidays that we'll talk about in the future, such as Christmas and Easter and so forth. But pagan observances offend God. He is not pleased with all this celebration because they're not just trick-or-treating, they're actually celebrating. And they're throwing parties and doing all sorts of things. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 21 to 22 reads, "You cannot drink from the cup of the Lord and from the cup of demons too. You cannot eat at the Lord's table and at the table of demons too." What? Do we dare rouse the Lord's jealousy? Do you think we are stronger than he is? And of course, we're not. We're not stronger than the Lord. But the important thing to note here is that pagan observances like this offend the Lord. Now, throughout the rest of this discussion, the sermon, I do make a lot of connections with witchcraft. And the reason why I do that is because this is the basis for Halloween. And the subject is Halloween. And the important thing that we need to see here is that witchcraft is the actual foundation for the beginning of Halloween. Let's talk a little bit about Halloween in America. The Pilgrims, when they came over, they did not want to bring in a lot of the pagan observances that they saw in England. And as you know, Pilgrims came from England, and they did for religious reasons, and they worshipped, and they refused to bring in a lot of the pagan holidays over. Halloween was not celebrated in America until 1900, although popular for centuries throughout the world. And that's interesting because, as you know, America was discovered hundreds of years before, and yet they managed to keep away these pagan holidays like that. but they banned it because of the occultist origins of Halloween. Irish immigrants, though, they brought it over in 1845. It's said that they actually celebrated this privately, but eventually they wore people down and they got their way, and they managed to make Halloween a practice throughout America, throughout the world. And it became more and more fashionable because it was a money-making time of the year. It does bring a lot of money. I don't know exactly how much, and maybe not as much this year as other times because of the fact that we have the coronavirus and people are wondering how in the world are we going to be able to hand out candy, and how are we going to get these kids to be able to avoid contamination and so forth. A lot of ideas have been thrown around, but none of them really make a lot of sense. We're not really sure whether people in our subdivision are going to do that, but they might, and it'd be interesting to see what happens this evening. But I want to talk to you about this gentleman here. His name is Williams, and I'm not sure if I can pronounce his last name, but his last name, the way I see it, is Schnoebelen, William Schnoebelen. This gentleman used to be, and in fact, I'll refer to him as this brother, because he's repented of being the high priest of uh, of uh, of Satan, the worship of Satan, and he's repented of that. He's become a Christian, and he tells us, according to a lot of his writings today, that Halloween itself is very demonic. He explains that children will open up a spiritual doorway that may lead to demonic possession or oppression by going house to house trick-or-treating. And we've never participated as a family in Halloween. Never allowed our children to go out. But I know there's a lot of Christians families that do that. They think it's okay. They think it's all in fun. But he explains that something very serious, because it seems like this is the time of the year where witches are really in greater power. And this is when they bring to light a lot of their demonic celebrations. And he claims that this is going to affect our children in a very negative way. I had an experience, though, with a young man that came to one of my classes years ago. And it was the same time that people come in, the kids, young people come into the college and they dress up sometimes, not all of them do, but some of them do. And this young man, he came dressed like a vampire. And we'll get into the vampirism in a while too, because there's a lot of connection with witchcraft and everything else for that. And he came in dressed like a vampire, and he had contact lenses that looked like a bright yellow, like a cat's eyes. And he was so distracting. He was sitting there in the front row, and I'm trying to make a presentation on technology, which, because I am, as most people know by now, I'm a computer science professor in my secular work outside my ministry. So there he was, and he was very distracting. And afterwards, I knew the answer, but I had to ask, so what are you dressed up for? I asked him afterwards. And he said, it's Halloween, sir. And I go, well, yeah, but that's kind of odd that you're coming like that. Well, I want to go to the parties and stuff and do all kinds of stuff afterwards. I said, okay, who am I to judge, I didn't like it, but who am I to tell him what to do? So I explained I noticed, and I still remember very distinctly, he had an A average, up to that point. So classes begin in late August and into September. So the end of October, I mean, that's a big chunk of your semester's gone through there. But I noticed that his grades dropped dramatically. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because of what this fellow wrote about opening a spiritual doorway that leads to demonic possession. This young man, I don't remember his name anymore, but I still see his face. His grades diminished dramatically. He was very quiet. He didn't participate very much. His grades were really low. I had to call him into the office and ask him what was going on with him, you know. And I'll never forget the way he put it. He just very quietly was looking down, and suddenly he lifted up his head and he said, "I've never been the same since Halloween." And I said, "I mean, that's the day when you were dressed up like a vampire with the yellow eyes and all that." "Yeah, that's what happened. I just can't think anymore. I can't think straight anymore." I said, "You sure that's all that is?" I can't think of anything else. I don't do drugs or nothing, but I'm just not the same anymore." And I said, "Well, is there anything I can do for you?" And he said, "I don't know. I'll have to figure this out." Well, he did barely squeak by my class, you know. I was hoping he would initiate the question, "Sir, could you pray for me?" like some of my students do. I'm not allowed to automatically offer spiritual guidance in my school, according to the rules, you know, state rules. But if they initiate it, the student initiates it, they're fine with it. And so that's the way we treat that. The point was that this was one of the first times that I noticed that Halloween does affect people in some way. And this young man was never the same again. I don't know how successful he was afterwards, but I would hope he finally got right and overcame all of that. But Halloween is one of the two holidays observed by public schools besides Valentine's Day. And guess what? Why do you think the reason is? It is because it's a non-religious holiday. And they don't celebrate religious things. They don't want God in schools. And I find that very sad. And in a sense, I guess I managed to work around it myself. I tell people because they told me to write my biography, you know, in my courses, and I do mention that I'm an ordained minister, and it at least opens the door or the opportunity for students that are seeking spiritual guidance and help to ask for that, because at least I'm giving them my calling card. And I know that throughout the years, the Lord has helped me minister to a lot of young people, and even in school. And I'm grateful for that privilege of having been able to do that. But getting back to this gentleman here that wrote this book, he does mention that there's a lot of connections between Halloween and the Druids, witchcraft, demonic possession, and all sorts of things. Pagan holidays are like that. And you know, if they weren't enticing, they were not something that was fun, I guess people wouldn't be doing it. Let's talk a little bit about the heroes of Halloween. Initially, this was a gentleman, and I'm not sure if I should be calling him a gentleman, but just trying to be politically correct, I guess you could say. The original Dracula, who is a character that is often comes out in not just movies, but also people dress up like him in Halloween. But this is the original one. You know, it wasn't this man was the original Dracula. He was the other name that he was known for was Vlad the Impaler. They said that he killed 40,000 to 100,000 European civilians, political rivals, criminals, and anyone they considered that he considered useless of humanity, mainly by impaling them. And what we mean by that is he would cut their heads off and he would put them on a stick, on a pointy stick, and then he would have his men dig it into the ground. And so his castle was surrounded by these heads. Kind of a gory picture, I imagine. Again, here's a connection back to England. That's where all of this paganism began. And I'm not saying that all of England is pagan, of course, but there's a lot of the beginnings there of paganism throughout Europe and even in America. But this was the very first person that actually did that. I don't know if he actually drank anybody's blood, A lot of times the legend tends to expand itself and really gets out of hand. But you wouldn't think that people will be attracted to a person like this. Now, the person that I used to see was the Bela Lugosi character, and he was not an attractive person. He was a very scary person. I heard that he was actually a decent person. He was just an actor, of course. But that's him in the top there. Bela Lugosi as Dracula, not very attractive. And so it kind of a turn off to a lot of young people. And so they changed that up. They wanted to make heroes of Halloween more attractive. They came up with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. And in that movie, Interview with a Vampire, I imagine a lot of people have seen that movie. I have never seen that movie, I'll be honest with you. But a lot of people were really enticed by these characters. They were at the top of their career, and so a lot of people were really interested in them. And they were fascinated by them, and it made this type of a horror character attractive. And as if that was not enough, they came up with a Twilight movie series there. And in that case, they had, I can't even name these actors, but I guess more young people know them than I do. I've never seen any of these movies either. I did see this guy here, and the reason I admit to that, I was a very young man. I was a boy, really, and my uncles took me to go see those movies. But it was their way of babysitting me. I was younger than them, but they were not a lot older. They were about 3 or 4 years older than me. So my dad had 9 brothers, or 8 brothers, and he was the 9th son, and he was the oldest. So they kind of babysit me, and they took me to these horror movies, which I did not enjoy at all. I did enjoy at least having a drink and a popcorn and all that, and I try not to look. And every time I would try to cover my face, my uncles would pull my hands down so I could, because they said I was wasting the movie, Anyway, they did make them more attractive, more interesting by the Twilight series, and there's at least 4 of them that we know about. I don't know if they made any more, but they always mix it up, and then they're never through with this. So witchcraft and vampirism, these are all connected to the paganistic practices of Halloween. There's another series called The Witches right there. And Anne Hathaway and Octavia Spencer are actually 2 of the women that are, coming out as witches, and making it interesting. And so Anne Hathaway looks like she's a glamorous witch, and I guess Octavia Spencer is looking like a little bit more of an old-fashioned type of witch, I suppose, But they glamorize that. And you might say, well, no worries here. I'm not going to be involved with witchcraft, even though, yeah, maybe I know about these things, but I don't practice it. Well, there are sins that are similar to witchcraft. And you may be practicing witchcraft, whether you realize it or not. 1 Samuel chapter 15, 22 to 23 says, but Samuel replied, what is more pleasing to the Lord, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to his voice? Listen, obedience is better than sacrifice, and submission is better than offering the fat of ram. Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft. So there's the word right there, rebellion. It is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. So because you have rejected the command of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. This is in reference to King Saul at that time. But what I was trying to have you consider is that when you rebel against the word of the Lord, in whatever form you might say, I'm not going to be a Sabbath keeper, I'm going to be a Sunday worshiper, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And even if the Bible says that I'm going to do my own thing, rebellion is just the same as witchcraft in the eyes of God. And he rejects people that do that. So it's essential that we understand that God is not honored by that. In fact, he calls us to holy living. He wants us to become holy. But the word holy means separate and consecrated unto the Lord. Because we need to belong to the Lord, and we need to not belong to the things of this world. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 9 to 12 reads, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, be very careful not to imitate the detestable customs of the nations living there. For example, never sacrifice your son or daughter as a burnt offering. Do not let your people practice fortune telling or use sorcery, which of course is a form of witchcraft, or interpret omens, or engage in witchcraft, or cast spells, or function as mediums or psychics, or call forth the spirits of the dead. Anyone that does these things is detestable to the Lord. It is because the other nations have done these detestable things that the Lord your God will drive them out ahead of you. So this is the reason why Israel got that land that they got, because of the fact that the Lord was driving them out because they were practicing witchcraft, among the other things. So any of these things that are related to paganism, the Lord is not honored by that. And he says that he abhors it. And in fact, he uses the word, they are detestable to him. It is not appropriate for a child of God to do those things. Now, let's talk about a few things that you also observe in Halloween. One of them is the black cats. They're also a symbol of Halloween. The Celts believed that black cats had once been people. In fact, those who practice witchcraft believe that witches can turn into black cats and vice versa. They also believe that if you wore a costume, then you would fool the dead into thinking you were one of them and they would leave you alone. So try to imagine this scenario of the Druids walking from house to house, and they were pretty much threatening households and telling them that they needed to give them something, something of value. And if they didn't, they would curse them and cast spells upon them. Now, if people were wandering around back then, during the time that the Druids were going house to house, and they were not looking for candy, by the way, they were looking for money or food or anything that they could get a hold of value. If anybody was wandering around, they would dress up like the Druids and kind of like witches and stuff. And that way they thought, oh, it's one of our boys or one of our girls, so they thought they would leave them alone. And that's what they were doing. So these kids, I imagine, they think it's all fun to be dressed up like that, but they have no idea where this all started. In fact, something as innocent looking as this jack-o'-lantern on the window is also from the Druids. They were told that if you had a pumpkin with a face carved in it with a candle in it, that would ward off some of the evil spirits that were coming their way. And so people were doing that because they believed it, you see. So you have all of these connections with witchcraft, which is why we're kind of having to lean on that, because witchcraft and Halloween go together hand in hand. There's a lot of witchcraft in print. So when you think about Harry Potter, you would think, well, that's just an entertaining children's books, But they've always had books like this over the years, and people use them to figure out how to cast spells, or sometimes they were just used to glamorize witchcraft. But when Christians or people that repented of paganism back in the old times of the biblical times, they were asked to get rid of these books. In fact, they had to burn them. Acts chapter 19, verse 18 and 19. And many that believed came and confessed and showed their deeds. Many of them also used curious arts. Curious arts might be incantations, magic spells, and so forth. They brought their books together and burned them before all men. And they counted the price of them and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. That's a lot of money back in the day. When you think about a penny could probably get your meal back then, penny can't even get you bubble gum anymore. But 50,000 pieces of silver probably, I can imagine, I tried to look that up, but probably be in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even $1 million. But they were not allowed to resell them because they were only spreading the same poison to other people. Therefore, they were asked to burn them. So the Lord wants us to be able to repent of our sin and to be able to turn away from things that are pagan like this. So witchcraft in print, these Harry Potter things, if you ever if you have those lying around someplace, I would not sell them to the bookstore. The used bookstore, I would simply burn. No sense in spreading the same poison to other people. So just bear in mind that even though we speak of these things, there are people that will make fun of it, they'll ridicule it, they will downplay it. But God is very serious about paganism and about holidays like Halloween. And he says that these people will not inherit the kingdom. In Galatians 5:19 to 21, it says the acts of sinful nature are obvious. Sexual immorality, this could be in physical, but it's all could be like pornography and things like that. Impurity, debauchery, idolatry, and of course, witchcraft that we've been talking about there. Hatred, because when you hate somebody, it's like you want to kill them. Discord, that like trying to cause divisions. Jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, and drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. And so it is that we need to be able to understand the people that are participating in these sort of things, and I'm sure there's going to be some of this drunkenness and craziness at some parties that is going to happen tonight, which is kind of surprising in light of the fact that we still have a virus that's still very contagious. And a lot of the people that are getting the virus now seem to be a lot of young people that are partying and having get-togethers, where they are not doing social distancing and taking care of themselves. But witchcraft is more accepted today than ever before. I was surprised to hear that witchcraft is something that even is considered a religion today. and it's acceptable in prisons as well as in the military. Whistleblower magazine has been studying the acceptance of witchcraft in this country. They are quoted as saying more and more American housewives, students, professors, and of course not this one, and even soldiers self-identify as witches. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. And maybe this is part of the great falling away that the Bible talks about before the coming of Christ. And indeed, there'll be a departure from the faith. And even though we may preach about it, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard too many ministers preach about paganism, Halloween, and other pagan holidays. It seems like it's not politically correct to talk about it. But you know what? I'm talking about it anyway, because the Lord will not have me silent. And so we'll be putting this out available to the masses, as they say, as we record this, and hopefully more and more people will listen to the truth. But 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 says, now the Spirit expressly says that in later times, some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. And that's what we're talking about here. This druid business, this witchcraft, the paganism that we've been talking about, all of that is all part of the same thing. And so as more and more people are turning to that, I believe that the Lord will eventually put a stop to it by coming once again. Many people think it's putting on these masks and everything is just good, clean fun. But we have become terribly permissive in this society today. And unfortunately, we shall suffer collectively because of it. Each time we call into question accepted traditions, as I have, regarding Halloween and Christmas, people will get upset. And I guess it's not a very popular thing to do that today, because you want to give, it seems like a lot of ministers today want to preach what people want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear. But the Lord is the one that called me into ministry, and it is him that I listen to. Therefore, I will preach regarding these things and oppose it as much as I can. But people don't see anything wrong with a type of celebration because it is done in clean fun. But how can it be clean fun when the basis of it is paganism, is witchcraft, is all demonic? Just because you may have changed the purpose for it, it does not mean that you have changed and rewritten history. It doesn't work like that at all. And so we are called not to imitate evil. 3 John verse 11, it says, beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God, and whoever does evil has not seen God. Therefore, do not imitate evil. So putting on a horror mask, putting on a skeleton costume or witch's costume and so forth, that is what you call imitating evil. And the Lord is telling you that whosoever does evil has not seen God. And you do not imitate it at all either. In fact, our attitude should be that we should hate evil. Romans 12:9 says, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, and hold fast to what is good. When somebody preaches you the truth and opens their heart to you and tells you what the Lord has laid in his heart, you should rejoice over that and hold on to that, because it's not as common as it used to be. So abhor what is evil, hate what is evil. And the other advice we are given is to abstain from anything that even looks like evil. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says, abstain from every form of evil. And that includes paganism, Halloween, and all of these other things, dressing up and behaving this way, And even though your basis for that may be clean fun, just you cannot clean up what has already been defiled. And so he tells us not to take part in these things. Ephesians 5:11 says, take no part in worthless deeds of evil and darkness. Instead, expose them. It is shameful even to talk about these things that ungodly people do in secret. And I certainly don't go around all year talking about paganism, Halloween, and things like that. But whenever I see it, I expose it. And that's what I'm doing. The Lord has told me to expose this thing, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm listening to God, and I hope that I'm honoring Him for that. Now, the last thing that I want to close with is the sad reality that people love darkness more than light. They like to dress up like all these other people back here. They think it's all really cool, fun, and so forth. But John 3:19-20, our Lord and Savior Jesus said, and this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather more than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. So my prayer for you is that you understand that the answer to this question is Halloween for Christians? No, it's not. There's no such thing as a Christian Halloween either. How can you actually make something that is pagan something religious? Does not work that way. And may the Lord gives you courage and determination to be able to do the things that are necessary, because it is not an easy thing to do. To tell your kids, we can't be doing this. This is not appropriate. And we must have faith, hope, and confidence that the Lord will give us the courage and the conviction to do the things that are right. The Lord richly bless you. May you share this with other people so that they can avoid this. Maybe might be a little bit too late during the day today, but maybe in the years ahead. So may God bless.